You see, they're as drunk as I am. They're clean by comparison. They're a group called the Sex Pistols.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we'll be looking at 10 incidents that got TV hosts fired.
The issue is that his version of events do not tally up with the BBC's version of events. That's the reason he says they're destroying his career.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
For this list, we're looking at the reasons British TV hosts got the sack, and we're including refusals to renew contracts. Let us know in the comments which firings you think were deserved. Ego death.
To television historians, Simon Dee was a modern Icarus, British television's first casualty.
Simon Dee became the UK's first chat show host, after astonishingly getting his start on one of the country's most notorious pirate radio stations, Radio Caroline. Eventually, Dee went legit and joined the BBC, but by all accounts got far too big for his boots.
A man who made a Faustian bargain with fame and has exchanged 7 years in the spotlight for 33 years in obscurity.
A pay dispute arose because ITV tried to poach him, offering £100,000 in 1969 for a 2-year contract. He challenged the BBC to match it, and when they didn't, he left. Unfortunately, his weekly show on ITV was an absolute disaster and got quickly cancelled. After returning to his pirate radio roots to protest the government, he became persona non grata for all broadcasters.
About a year later, he's on the dole.
Ultimately, his fines caught up with him.
A scandal too far. Following multiple widely publicised sex and drug scandals in the early 2000s, original presenter of Have I Got News For You, Angus Deaton, was unceremoniously dropped.
This has been one story of the week, isn't it? But the one I'm really interested in, Angus, is...
He'd been cavorting with prostitutes and taking illicit substances, all of which came out in the tabloid press.
She didn't tell you?
Well, you must have paid her for the article. I mean, I don't want to dwell on this, but...
After the first scandal emerged, he was on thin ice, but then it happened again. The BBC said that Deaton's credibility to mock the news had been destroyed, and he was, in his own words, forced to leave. Years on, and many still regard Angus Deaton's sacking as a massive mistake from the BBC.
I mean, I was as guilty of Ian really of sort of bringing on the front cover of the news of the world. I mean, it's really, to go to all that kind of effort is just unbelievable.
Punching a producer. Yes, we know that technically Clarkson's contract on Top Gear wasn't renewed, but that's just a much easier way to give someone the sack and have an excuse on the BBC's part.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how thrilled are you that Top Gear is nowhere near as successful now that you're not on it?
It's a hard face to pull, this one.
Clarkson ultimately was dropped by the BBC following this incident, where, after a long shoot and a lack of hot food, Clarkson lost his temper and punched a producer. Richard Hammond and James May walked as well, and the BBC was left floundering.
James and Richard always say, no, it's a shame, we wish them all the best. I don't.
They left to make the Grand Tour, but then, in early 2023, it was announced that Clarkson had once again found his contract unrenewed, this time with Amazon, following his comments about Meghan Markle.
And how will you prepare for the massive hole in your life, emotionally?
What, when I don't have James May in it?
Yes.
White male. Mark Lawrenson, former footballer and sports presenter, found himself dropped by the BBC in 2022. Why? Well, Lawrenson himself has some ideas and believes the BBC wanted to get rid of him for firstly nearing retirement age and also for being a white male.
An old white man loses his job. Leo, are you worried?
Yeah, I am, and we should all be worried on this panel.
Never mind that sacking someone for being white would also be racial discrimination and something the BBC isn't allowed to do.
Although, to be honest, 65, that's retirement age, so, you know, that might be a good time to drop people.
Fellow Football Focus presenter Dan Walker also supposedly had a similar thing happen in 2021, saying that he was also fired by the broadcaster for being old and white. Lawrenson has since moved over to GB News.
Is that a crime?
No, it's...
If I just cancelled myself?
No,
there?
it's just sexist. I don't think that the gender matters at all when people are talking about sport.
Tortoises. Did Richard Bacon really snort cocaine from the back of a Blue Peter tortoise? Well, no, almost certainly not. That was just a salacious story the tabloids began.
I got fired for punctuality. Because if you take a lot of coke, you're always late for things.
But Bacon really was sacked for taking illegal substances. The lie was the involvement of the tortoises in the affair.
Fred and Frida, the tortoises on Blue Peter. Yeah. Big white lines.
Well, he gave them coke.
I didn't give any tortoises coke.
Bacon remains, to this day, the only Blue Peter presenter to be fired in the middle of his contract, even if others have been mysteriously dropped for other, vaguer reasons.
One of the Sunday newspapers reported that Richard Bacon, a Blue Peter presenter, had taken an illegal drug.
He hasn't let it stop his career, though, and has had many presenting gigs since, saying that the sacking was the wake-up call he needed. Royal mistake. Comedian Danny Baker made what can generously be described as a controversial tweet back in 2019.
The genesis and execution of that disastrous tweet is so trivial and absurd compared to its perception and consequences.
The actual tweet in question was a black and white image of a couple stepping outside with a chimpanzee between them, the chimp wearing a coat, shoes and hat. Baker captioned it, "Royal Baby Leaves Hospital," to poke fun at the birth of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's son.
And they say, well, before the news here on BBC One, it's time for monkeys dressed as famous people plus fairground music.
Baker understood immediately the race angle on this tweet, quickly apologising and defending himself by saying he actually hadn't known whose baby the new royal baby was when he wrote it.
You know, you've got to be an ignoramus or racist, be unaware of that trope and that slur.
Baker still got sacked by 5 Live and has rarely appeared on TV or radio since. Allegations from the 70s.
Meanwhile, one of Britain's best-known radio DJs, Tony Blackburn, has confirmed he's been sacked by the BBC after 5 decades of broadcasting.
Following the Jimmy Savile scandal, Top of the Pops was examined in greater detail by the BBC after they finally admitted something dodgy was going on, that is. First, there was some confusion about whether Tony Blackburn had been interviewed in relation to allegations against Savile back in the 1970s.
Tony Blackburn, however, says that he's not suggested in any way, shape or form in Dame Janet's report.
Then there was a complaint supposedly made against Blackburn by a teenage girl, Claire McAlpine, in 1971 in her diary. It was claimed at the time that she made the whole thing up, but she tragically took her own life, aged just 15.
Now, Blackburn has been quite categorical in his denial of any wrongdoing.
He is. We're talking about allegations that pertain to a 45-year-old incident back in 1971.
Blackburn was sacked by the BBC, but was then hired back just a few months later, many believing he'd been used as a scapegoat. Dirty old man.
They are punk rockers. The new craze, they tell me.
The year was 1976. The Sex Pistols were at the peak of their short career, and Queen had dropped out of appearing on Thames TV's Today Show at short notice. What did Today do? Invite the Pistols on, of course, despite the band still being in the grip of controversy after controversy. Bill Grundy was the man asked to interview them, but he obviously didn't think much of the punk revolution.
Are you worried, or are you just enjoying yourself?
Enjoying myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
Among other things, he goaded the band members into swearing on live TV, appeared visibly drunk, and tried to flirt with Susie Sue.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty son. You dirty old man.
His career went into the toilet following the Today incident, with Grundy getting a suspension and the whole show later getting cancelled. Activists.
Around me, do not touch me, otherwise you will go again.
Former soldier Ant Middleton has always been controversial. From the aggressive tactics he uses to train recruits on SAS Who Dares Wins, to him saying he wouldn't want to see his son cry if he was upset, he's ruffled feathers.
Number 12, listen to me. I want you to go back to the accommodation, put your burdens down and come out as you are. Is that understood?
But why was he ultimately dropped by Channel 4? Well, he likened the Black Lives Matter movement to the EDL and called BLM absolute scum on Twitter. Channel 4 said this ran contrary to their mission of being anti-racism, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, and Middleton was sacked. Other members of the DS stepped up to the plate to fill his shoes.
Get in there, turn around, chest high. I tell you to fully submerge yourself. You come up head only above water. I will give you a series of questions, you answer those questions, and I will get you out.
Tragedy. It wasn't so much that Jeremy Kyle was sacked, but that his entire show was cancelled and everybody who worked on it lost their jobs too.
It has a reputation for confrontation and controversy where participants face off to air their most personal problems.
Kyle has since returned to television to do presenting gigs on various channels, but ITV will never bring back The Jeremy Kyle Show. Magnet for controversy ever since it was launched, the show was finally ended in 2019 following the tragic death of one of its guests.
Everyone at ITV and The Jeremy Kyle Show is shocked and saddened at the news of the death of a participant in the show, and our thoughts are with their family and friends.
Steve Diamond failed a lie detector test and took his own life as a result. It later emerged that this wasn't the first nor only time this had happened, and ITV quickly canned the show for good.
In the same year, a Manchester judge likened the show to bear baiting after sentencing a man for assaulting another guest on stage.
Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.